these are the areas we really need to delve into it. I'm sure our participants, they are teaming with a lot of questions. I would ask you to remember to pen down your questions into the Q&A chat box. I'll be proceeding now. I think it's a good point to take our next speaker. So we'll be asking Mr. Oyedele to come over and deliver his presentation on the topic of the imperatives for fiscal policy under AFTA for Nigerian businesses. So over to you, Mr. Oyedele, and you've also been allotted 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I would be very quick with my presentation, given that a lot of backgrounds have been provided. So I'm focusing on the imperatives for fiscal policy under the AFCFTA for Nigerian businesses. Now, let me start with this slide, which is about the regional economic communities that we have within Africa and the key challenges. And I just thought it would be nice to call this not the Africa that we want. We are all aware about the Agenda 2063, about the Africa we want. So it must be that the Africa we have now is not the Africa we want. And we can do something about it, so we are not helpless. We can't just complain and then pray and hope that our problems will go away. Some of it is to first start by identifying what is it that we're doing now that we're doing wrong, and how can we improve from that. Interestingly, you will see that we have so many regional economic communities within Africa. So the question is, why are you creating AFCFTA? Apparently what happens was, whenever we create one and it's not working, we say maybe it needs to be a little bit bigger. If it's big, we say maybe we need a smaller one. And you can see even ECOWAS, the one that is painted there, we have even sub-regions within ECOWAS. So this is a spaghetti of confusion, in my view. And these haven't worked. So the question now is, can we bring the whole of Africa together? Maybe if we are one, at least in terms of trade, maybe that would help. And of course, there are examples around the world to give us that comfort that this is a move in the right direction. You will see some of the challenges we have there include limited double tax treaties. So Africa is there creating regional blocks, let's work together, but they're not even thinking about double taxation and how to limit the impact. We've heard the fact that the trade within Africa is very small. And if you're not trading with yourself, why should the rest of the world take you seriously? We've had issues around immigration challenges. We all still remember the xenophobic attacks in South Africa and to some extent in Ghana. Over-reliance on commodities with little value addition, which means we're not creating wealth for our people. Many African countries, including Nigeria, rank very low on competitiveness, ease of doing business, and human capital development index. There's high unemployment, and we have exchange rate volatility because we rely a lot on commodities. And when anything happens, even if it doesn't happen in Africa, I was saying that even if no case of COVID was recorded in Africa, we'll still suffer economically. Because once there's a crisis in Europe, America, Asia, and the rest of the world, what we depend on mostly to fund our revenue and government will suffer, and they would have suffered as well. And so the objectives of AFTA include eliminating tariff and non-tariff barriers, liberalized trade in services, competitiveness of the economies of the state parties, resolving challenges of overlapping membership. You see from that spaghetti of confusion I spoke about, we have a lot of overlapping membership, which never solved any problems, actually compounded them. Cooperation and dispute resolution, economic integration, free movement of capital and persons, and then a foundation for a continental customs union, as well as industrialization and socio-economic development. I thought it's important to remind us of these objectives, so we also just don't limit everything to trade in goods and services. So the key provisions include the areas of cooperation, trade policy, trade facilitation, productive capacity, trade-related infrastructure. Can we build certain infrastructure that we need in Africa and then build them across Africa? Imagine that would be amazing and fantastic, because no individual country can do it. But can we do it together and create those infrastructure to facilitate trade, movement of people and investments within the continent? You also have trade finance, trade information, and very importantly, we don't pay a lot of attention to this, is factor market integration. And so what this means is, whether you're talking about capital, whether you're talking about labor, whether you're talking about entrepreneurship, how can we make sure that these things can easily move across Africa, and actually not just move to the point where they're most productive. That way Africa will be able to extract the best value from every $1 of cost in terms of factor market items that they invest. So in terms of the protocol on trade in goods, the treaty says very clearly, state parties are to treat products imported from other state parties after customs clearance in a manner no less favorable than how like or similar domestic products of national origin are treated. So this is where the key, the core of the whole conversation is in terms of trade in goods. For trade in services, a state party is required to treat the services and service suppliers of any other state party in a manner no less favorable than how like or similar services and service suppliers are treated. So these, two clauses actually is probably about 90% of the issues you have to deal with under the treaty. The main sectors and the implications from my point of view, and based on a lot of analysis that we have done, include for agriculture, you expect that we have more local production, not only local production, but then ability to improve the regional agricultural value chain. So many of us know that today, we export cocoa instead of exporting chocolate. So we export, raw cashew nuts instead of processing them. Data has shown that you make more money from adding this value to those primary items. And hopefully we also become food sufficient ourselves. As a country, COVID reminded us that no matter how integrated the world is, you can call it a global village if you want, but when there's a crisis, everybody will take care of themselves first, and that is so natural. Even as individuals, that's what we do. We think about ourselves first before other people. So if there's anything where we need to be self-sufficient, it is with respect to food. Maybe next to that would be healthcare. So we see a lot of advantages for agriculture in terms of the treaty. Then there's the industry and manufacturing, including the point that my brother has just spoken to now. We want to be able to see increased competition leading to manufacture of better quality product, not less. We want better quality products and we want them at affordable prices. So if a government has to impose a lot of duties so that you don't bring items from other countries, that is only good if it's going to be temporary, because what you do is you're punishing the people for the inefficiency they have locally. You're making them pay what they don't have to pay. If you do that temporarily so you can up your capacity, protect your local industry, for them to gain knowledge and expertise and know-how, and over time, they'll be competitive, then that is good. But if you're going to do that forever, it's pointless. You're just punishing the people. So we know that we have a lot of challenges in manufacturing, but this is one area where we need to have a long-term plan. The problems in that sector will not be solved in a year, not even 2 years, not even 5 years, but there has to be a long-term plan, and there has to be consistent implementation of those policies that are refined over time as things evolve. We should not take one step forward and then take 2 or 3 backwards, which is what we've seen over the past decades. Improve access to raw materials, enhance economies of scale and price competitiveness, which will lead to actually cheaper product for African people, including those of us in Nigeria. So for services, increased supply of labor and foreign investment, access to larger markets across Africa, improving the export capacity of both formal and informal service suppliers. I think this is going to be, in my view, an area of interest for SMEs. Many people say, oh, how would our small businesses compete? In fact, I think the story of AFTCA is better now because of COVID. What COVID has done, even though it's a pandemic, is that it has taught us that actually we can exist virtually. So small companies that would struggle before to go to another country and set up a shop, suddenly the whole world is now open and receptive to doing business online. So what that means is I can have my small business in Nigeria and then have customers across Africa without having to visit those countries physically. Interregional competition leading to better quality services as well. And if you think about entertainment, better exploitation of intellectual property rights, our guys in Nollywood do a lot of hard work. They don't have a lot to show for it. The Hollywood in the US alone is bigger than the size of the Nigerian economy in terms of the GDP power that they have. So imagine that we just get it right with our entertainment industry, creative sector. We can make a lot of money. We can create a lot of wealth for the Nigerian people and for the economy, and so on and so forth. So I'll move on because of time. So I think this is my last slide, and this is speaking to the fiscal policy imperatives, having said those concepts that I said before. If we have problems and we are in self-denial, then we are not anywhere close to finding a solution. First and foremost, we must admit that we have challenges. We must be able to properly analyze what those challenges are, determine the root causes, and then start finding the solutions. I think that the biggest solution and the biggest impact government would make with regard to AFTCA will not be the money that government will spend. Government does not even have the money in any way to spend. I said on a different program recently that the entire budget of the federal government of Nigeria is not enough to administer palliative for COVID. If you want to take care of all the poor people, it's not enough. Let alone talking about infrastructure, which has been estimated to be about $100 billion every year for the next 30 years, being what we need. So these things are not things that government will be able to do. So, but government can introduce policies that will create the right environment for this to be done by the private sector. So with respect to AFTCA, some of the key areas where we need policy intervention and need them urgently after robust consultation, engagement. I don't want us to do anything in a hurry just because we want to tick a box. One of it is review and harmonization of tariff rules and trade policies. So tariff is just sitting down and saying, what do we have now in terms of rates? What is AFTCA asking us to do? What do we currently do under ECOWAS? How do we move progressively over time to comply and make sure that we do not hurt our own internal economies and sectors? And in terms of trade policy, so there's some countries in Africa already, whether you go to Kenya, whether you go to Ethiopia, where they said you cannot do plastic packaging if the plastic is not biodegradable. So which means you can actually, as of today, that AFTCA has kicked off, produce your nice product in Nigeria, package it with plastic, and you can't sell it in Kenya. Because in Nigeria, it's okay to sell it. We can debate whether that policy is right or wrong, but it's not acceptable in Kenya. How do you ensure that you deal with those kind of issues on a practical level? Number two is identification of area of comparative and competitive advantage. So I know this is, an economic terminology, but just to simplify it, comparative advantage is where you can do something at the lowest opportunity cost. So for example, Nigeria should have a comparative advantage in refining petroleum products and selling to the rest of Africa. I did some analysis recently of the top 10 economies in Africa, and it turns out that their number one import for 8 of them is refined petroleum products, but they're not buying from Nigeria. Of course, Nigeria is not even refining enough to take care of its own need. let alone export to other people. Imagine we get to a point in the next few years where we don't export even a barrel of crude oil, but we refine all our oil in Nigeria and we sell the refined product to the rest of Africa. Just imagine the amount of employment that will be generated, the growth in GDP, the foreign exchange that we'll earn. We'll stop importing, so we don't even spend FX in importing, and then we keep all our FX, and we make more than selling crude oil if we sell refined products. So Nigeria will have a comparative advantage with refined products. But competitive advantage will come from sectors like our Nollywood. So it's not that we make a movie cheaper than the rest of Africa, but we have the brand that the rest of Africa wants and the rest of the world. And that can create, so Hollywood is not the most affordable, but they make billions of dollars sometimes from their productions. Development of institutional and human capacity is important. Africa has started. If you go to the border, would you see that? What is the experience you're likely to witness? Do people even understand? People need to implement Africa. How many of them even understand what they need to do? Do we have the human capacity? And do we have the institutional capacity? Development of safeguards to protect growing businesses and provision of anti-abuse clauses. It's good that Africa says you need to do all these things about 90% of your product, and then 7% you can do over the next 5 to 10 years or thereabouts. And you have 3% that you don't have to do. So we have to identify what sectors do we need to protect and why are we protecting them, so that we don't then, incentivize, bad behavior or inefficiency. So policies to address infrastructural challenges. This particularly is important for the manufacturing sector because they are heavy in terms of infrastructure. They need road, they need electricity to work, otherwise they can't compete. So for infrastructural challenges, one of the policies that we need to think carefully about is public-private partnership. So I'm still of the view that, for example, government did not need to borrow to do rails because rail is commercially viable. Why not create the right environment and let the private sector do it 100%, and then they pay taxes to government from their money? Government should not borrow money and give to NTA. Why? Why should we borrow money and give to NTA? We already have a lot of TV stations that are running profitably. Why don't we even, for example, sell NTA? I know some people are going to be angry with me, but we need to make these very decisive decisions about our country and think always about what is best for Nigeria, not what is best for some people's mindsets or their own pockets or vested interests. Then dumping has to be addressed, transshipment, trade deflection. There are already provisions under AFCA to help us deal with that. So it's not a question of how do we implement that on a local basis within Nigeria. We need to overhaul and digitize custom processes. Can we scan a container in a few minutes rather than having to do it manually? And the good thing about this is it's not only good for AFCA and trade, it's good for us to protect, the importation of small arms. So which means it helps with security. Number two, it helps with making money from custom duties. I think that if we get everything sorted out with customs, including using technology and improving the processes, we can make more money from customs alone, custom duties and taxes, to fund the current size of the budget. We should be talking about 10 trillion from custom, not 1.something trillion. Then cooperation between customs and other agencies. I have my own very aggressive recommendation for Nigeria, which is to merge tax FRS and custom together, like you have in the UK with FMRC, like you have the IRS in the US, like you have the GRA in Ghana, like you have SARS in South Africa, like you have the KRA in Kenya. Merge them together. That way you reduce efficiency, you block the opportunity for people to take advantage of being disjointed to exploit the system. People can import something for 10 million and declare it for 50 million when they're filing tax returns, and we don't find out easily. And number 9, I've highlighted it because I think this is so important and I think it's an easy win. I call it a quick win that has a big impact. We're talking about trading with ourselves, but we're not talking about what is the impact of paying taxes everywhere. If we don't address the issue of double taxation, even though you open your borders and you're trading, people will not be able to trade because it will not be commercially viable. So we need to think about how can we incorporate within the treaty elimination of double taxation and also elimination of double non-taxation. People who do business should pay taxes, but it should not be double taxation. And I think Nigeria can lead the debate on this very important area, which has in my view, been properly taken care of under the treaty as of yet. And finally, how do we address non-tariff barriers, exchange rate regime, local content rules, discriminatory minimum capital, where we have a different rate for if you're a local versus if you're coming from another country, restrictive directorship and shareholding. So all these areas where we still have things that do not align with AFCA, we need to think about them. One, to comply, but two, to also look at what they're doing in other countries to be able to identify areas of opportunities for us as Nigerians to look at the rest of the continent. Clearly, we have the largest population, and we have every reason to be worried that people want to dump everything in Nigeria. But we can also think about it different to say our market is 200 million, but Africa is 1.2. So Africa is creating an additional market of 1 billion people. How can we take advantage of that? Interestingly, the rest of Africa are afraid of Nigeria with Africa. So we shouldn't be the one being afraid because we have the skill, we have the resources, and we have the scale to optimize value for our country and for our people. So I'll close with this comment by the former president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who said, Africa is not poor, it is just poorly managed. I agree with her 100%, but I also think that we now have an opportunity more than ever before to change the narrative and tell a different story of Africa. So thank you very much for paying attention to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oyedele, for those fresh insights and deep perspectives on the imperatives for the fiscal policy, under AFTA for Nigerian businesses. And we hear you loud and clear on many of the things you said about Africa, where we are coming from, where we are now, that the Africa we have now is not really the Africa we want. So it's like a spaghetti Africa. And hopefully we can bring the whole of Africa together. So hopefully AFTA will help us to achieve these objectives. And we also hear you clearly in terms of how you shared with us some of the areas we have advantages, as a Nigerian economy and the business, manufacturing, agriculture, services, and entertainment. And it is good that we do take care of this. And it's interesting, despite COVID and all the challenges that it has brought around, that in terms of AFCA, that it might actually be a blessing in disguise. Our businesses may not need to set up brick and mortar shops in other countries in order for them to trade with their African partners. So let's see how that works out.